and welcome to the Hurling Show. Myself, Shane Stapleton and Michael Verney with me. Brought to you by our sponsor, eFrontiers, the recruitment specialist. Check them out at e-frontiers.com. Or if you're thinking about making a career move, email them at ourgame@e-frontiers.com. You can see it up there at the top of the screen, just if you didn't catch it while it was flying. Michael Verney, we're buzzing. The Intercounty Championship is back.
We're back. It's like that Michael Jordan statement when he came out of retirement. I'm back. We're back. It's deadly. So it's great. Like we're looking a couple of days ahead of the championship game starting back, and there's just that buzz again. All the talk. Will they? Won't they? Now we can finally actually, analyse what we think is going to happen in the games, not whether they're going ahead or not. They're going ahead. It's great excitement. There's only probably like two big Liam McCarthy games, we'll say, this weekend, but there's a myriad of other games. It's great to have it back. It's great to be looking forward to it again and talking about something positive.
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, Limerick versus Clare is obviously the big one, the Shannonside derby. You've also got Dublin against Laois, and that's a big grudge match after what happened last year in the preliminary quarter-final when Laois shocked the Dubs, who had beaten Galway only a couple of weeks beforehand. There's also Christy Ring, Joe McDonough, Nicky Rackard, Laurie Maher. There's a swathe of competitions, and we're going to touch on them all. No better place to start, though, than Clare against Limerick. I mean, if you're to be honest about it, it feels like this is going to be a 15-point win for Limerick. I mean, there's just too many losses in that Clare panel. I mean, go through them. No Podge Collins, he's left a couple of weeks ago. Peter Duggan, who was, a star man in 2018. John Conlon, likewise, should have been nominated for Hurler of the Year that season. Colin Galvin wasn't far off. We're talking about all-star players. So they're in a serious bit of bother. I believe Niall Deasy, the Clare Echo, reported a couple of weeks ago that he's no longer on the panel. The likes of Paul Flanagan, apparently he has rejoined. And James O'Connor was saying Brian is certainly playing with a depleted hand, but he's got to play with whatever hand he has available to him. And there's almost a resignation to that quote.
There definitely is, yeah. Like there's no real positive talk coming out of Clare, and I believe they've conceded 10 goals in their last two games. They played two challenge games, so they conceded 10 goals between those two games. Looking like there's going to be a couple of debutants. It looks like Eibhear Quilligan could be in goals. Looks like Liam Curry could be in the full back line too. Both will be making their championship debuts. It's very, very hard to get away from that quartet of all-stars that you're missing. Like, if you go through it a bit more, like Podge was nominated for Hurler of the Year in 13. Peter Duggan was brilliant in 18. John Conlon brilliant in 18. Colin Galvin brilliant in 13 and 18. When you look at when Clare have been going well, those four players have probably been the four that have been leading the line nearly more than anybody else. There's only four players left from that 2013 All-Ireland final replay. It's Pat O'Connor, Dave McInerney, Tony Kelly and Shane O'Donnell. Now there's still four brilliant players left behind, but what they've lost, it's very, very hard to get away from that. Another point as well, Shane, is like John Kiley's coming in. This is John Kiley's fourth year with Limerick. They know exactly what they're doing. They have a set pattern. They know the players that they have. Everybody knows what they have to do. Brian Lohan has come in. Conlon was there for earlier stages of the year. Podge was there for earlier stages of the year. They were playing and then they're injured. Now they're gone. What way are they playing? He's only been there he was actually a late appointment as well. So he was only there maybe 3 or 4 months where he's actually had the squad. Then they're off for 6 months. Now they're back again. It definitely does help to be a manager that's been on the scene for a couple of years, know your players, know what they're going to do in the downtime. And importantly, I suppose, know that the players know what you want from them. So I don't know, do Clare have a particular way they're playing at the moment? I don't know. Can you bet in something like that? Look at Limerick. Limerick tried to bet in a style of play in 17, didn't work at all. All of a sudden, switch flicked in 18 and it works. So, everything is pointing towards a fairly comprehensive Limerick win. And funnily enough, when you look back at the last 2 years, Limerick beat Clare by 18 points last year. Clare beat Limerick by 11 points the year before. And you're just thinking, it's going to be a comprehensive win either way. And if it's going to be a comprehensive win, there's only one side that are going to be winning comprehensively, and that's Limerick.
Yeah, I mean, we can't forget though that this Clare team is in a league final. I mean, everyone is aware that this is the Munster quarter final, but it also doubles up as the league final because they finished top of either side of the division.
I don't think everybody's aware of that, to be honest with you. Genuinely, I don't think a lot of people are aware of it because it's totally slipped through the net. Even chatting John Kiley about it, he'd no interest in talking about a league. It's a championship game. It's a do or die Championship game. There'll be a cup presented at the end of it, but like there's not going to be too much hoopla. There's not going to be a big, picture of someone being absolutely delighted with a league trophy. It's as big as the league is, it's a very, very small thing in the grand scheme of things now.
Yeah, but the point being is that they've done well enough to get there. So they beat Dublin, they beat Wexford, Carlow and Laois they'll certainly expect to beat, but you still have to go out and do it. And they drew at Nolan Park. So we're not talking about a team that, just because they're missing some of these key men, and they will be big losses, that they're therefore they don't have any sort of a team whatsoever. They certainly do. They're going to have probably David McInerney in midfield alongside Tony Kelly. That was the experiment that I felt was pretty much working. You had the sort of iron fist and the velvet glove together at midfield, and it's good to have a partnership like that. And the fact that they had a few games, albeit a long time ago now, that is something for them to work with. The inside forward line,
just on that chain as well, they're capable of probably hitting, you could hit 7 or 8 points from play between them from middle of the field. But if Clare are leaking goals at the back, like, are you really, really robbing Peter, and you're not even paying Paul, really? If they're going to concede 3 or 4 goals and McInerney's not there, fair enough, he'll have an influence on things at the middle of the field. Will he have as much of an influence in the middle of the field as he would as maybe shoring things up at the back? So I think that's going to be interesting as well. Will they be able to get more out of him going forward as they would going backwards? And like, he's going to come up against Will O'Donoghue or Keane Lynch probably in the middle of the field as well. So if he's only breaking 50-50 with one of them, that's probably not enough for what you could get out of him maybe at fullback.
But they absolutely need a competitor in midfield, because Tony Kelly's brilliant, and if you put the ball in his hand, and he's good at getting on breaks and all that kind of stuff, and he could score 5 or 6 points. We know he's capable of doing that. But there's a fair chance that Limerick will find a way to blot him out, and the ball won't get to him in the first place, and they'll have someone sitting on him, and they'll have numbers ready to pounce on him anytime he gets the ball. Now, just to even jump at how Limerick might rejig their team with the knowledge that Richie English, we're not expecting him to play. Mike Casey, he's out. Who goes full back? I mean, my initial reaction earlier in the year was, a couple of weeks ago, was Dan Morrissey would go full back. And that is the talk, and that maybe Barry Nash or Paddy O'Loughlin would go wing back. Maybe Aaron Costello, who was playing in the league. I mean, we were down in the Gaelic grounds to watch Limerick batter Galway in a very impressive performance. He was cornerback.
Aaron Costello, who's 28 years of age, Shane, remember?
Yeah. To be fair, you called him a young player there recently.
Will you go in? You did it as well.
Nah, I don't think so. But anyway, enough people hammered us anyway and let us know that he's 27 or 28 years of age. He is a good player. Like, there's no doubt he's a good player. Dan Morrissey has played full-back before. He's a competitor. And I think you could just say, let's put Sean Finn full-back, let's put Aaron Costello, and then someone else who mightn't necessarily have a big size profile, or maybe even throw Barry Nash back there, because generally you'll have 2 full-backs sitting and one who's kind of following the roamer. But in this case, if you do that, and you have Barry Nash, who's more used to being further out the field, I mean, let's not forget he used to be in the forward line as well. But if the other team kind of realises, okay, he's playing as one of the full backs here, let's drag him back closest to goal, maybe he wouldn't like that. Whereas for Dan Morrissey, I don't think it'd be too much of a big deal, and therefore they can just keep Barry Nash out in the wing. And to be honest, at times last year he looked excellent. When he came on against Kilkenny in the All-Ireland semi-final, I was very, very impressed with him. So much in all, as there's definitely issues for Limerick in the sense that you're taking out arguably the best full-back in the game. Obviously the likes of Dahi Burkett have something to say about that. They still have very, very good backup. I don't think Limerick are massively weakened. A little bit, but it's more question marks than guaranteed that all of a sudden the back door is open.
Yeah, no, I believe Barry Nash played cornerback against Galway in a challenge game. That was when Mike Casey started fullback. Then Casey is gone and Dan Morrissey slips back, and it looks like Nash will go back out and Costello will come into the corner. Yeah, I don't think they're severely weakened. If they were to pick up another injury amongst their backs, they could be in a bit of trouble. But you're probably looking at Paddy O'Loughlin is probably still going to lose out in the backs, which will tell you, the wealth of options that they have available to them there. And I think we talked about this before, about maybe man markers even in the Limerick defence. And we were kind of like, there might be, Sean Finn is maybe the closest to it, but there's no specific man markers. They're all able to play that role to a certain extent. They're all able to ball play as well. So I think the fact that they're kind of like Tip in that instance, that they're kind of interchangeable, will kind of play to their strengths here. I definitely think it's an awful pity from a Clare point of view. They'll still try and go after the full back line.
Well, at least that, like Aaron Cunningham, Aaron Shanaher and Shane O'Donnell is a pretty good full forward line. Like if Aaron Shanaher could have stayed fit over the last few years, He's a really, really good forward. He's a ball winner. He'll turn. He'll go at you. Remember that goal he scored against Tipperary in the league a couple of years ago when I think he dragged Cathal Barrett along with him. Aaron Cunningham, there's obviously that funny sort of side plot that his father Alan is involved in the Limerick backroom team, and what sort of conversations are going on this week, because Aaron is obviously trying to break Alan's heart and vice versa. That really is quite the side plot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a gas one, because I was chatting to Aaron earlier on in the year. He was away the last couple of years, and I was just asking him, like, number one, is he lean towards Limerick? Does he not support Limerick? They're obviously massive rivals, but does he follow them with a bit more interest? And he was just saying, like, no, like, it's, if anything, it's the exact opposite of that. He said, I definitely wasn't supporting them, maybe a bit the other way, if anything. I wouldn't be supporting Limerick now at all. Dad is involved with them, and he's probably been delighted that I've been away, so that we haven't had that meeting in the middle of the summer. So what's the conversation like at the breakfast table, the dinner table? Maybe they're not talking about it at all. They're fairly used to it now at this stage, because it happened in 17, and Alan was actually involved as a coach under Ollie Baker in Offaly, and it happened then as well. So it's something they've been pretty used to, but definitely adds a dynamic to it. Like, I'm sure we're asking questions about the Limerick full back line. I'm sure Aaron Cunningham was trying to find out off his dad who he's going to be marking. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But it's just another little interesting thing to it.
And obviously Aaron would want to keep an eye on what he's been fed by the father. You know the way, like in Austin Power, or is it Austin Power? No, Dumb and Dumber, where he's handing him the old Dulcolax and he's there, drink it up and get that down. Anyway, John Kiley, is he trying to sell us a pup? Anybody that knows anything about Clare Limerick games over the last couple of decades, maybe 4 decades and more, will know that you wouldn't want to make any presumptions about anything, because you'd be badly mistaken. I've been involved in enough Limerick teams where Limerick or Clare have had the upper hand, and I certainly won't be underestimating the challenge that lies ahead. Do you think, in the back of his mind, in the back of Limerick minds, they expect to win this game comfortably enough?
I'd agree with you, from the sense that, like, that might be, you're kind of thinking that's what he actually thinks. But having been on the Zoom call with him that day and just seeing how he was so stone-faced about it, I think this is actually what he thinks. And I think he's a kind of a Cody type character, in the sense that I don't think he allows that sort of thought process to come into his head, and I don't think he allows it to come into his players' heads either. Like, if you look at 18, maybe they were a bit complacent going down to that game in Cusack Park, maybe because they were already through. Look what happened to them. That's probably the last game that they were probably complacent for, maybe aside from maybe the first 20 minutes of the All-Ireland semi-final last year. And they got handed their arses to some extent. So the 2 times that they have been complacent, so I don't really see that happening. And I think they're a funny kind of a team. They have that Kilkenny instinct where, like, if Limerick can beat Clare by 10 points on Sunday, they'll beat them by 20 points. Yeah. They have that killer instinct about them. They don't take the foot off the throat if they get it placed on the throat at all. They will stay going and going and going. And when I look at the chances that Limerick will create, Limerick, like, they're easily going to create probably 30, 35 scoring chances at the weekend. And it's very easy to see them putting up a 222 or 223. And I just don't know, like barring Limerick, like, are able to go to town, or barring Clare are able to go to town the full forward line and get 3 or 4 goals, I just don't see how they're going to be able to keep it pucked out to them. And while the 15 that you name, and particularly the forwards and the full forward line, that's a brilliant full forward line. But now you don't have an Aaron Cunningham coming in off the bench. You don't have an Aaron Shannon coming in with 20 minutes to go to snap a ball. I'm not sure what sort of an influence that they're going to have. You don't have a Podge coming in maybe to turn the game as well. So, like, if you're looking at game changers, if the game is tight, you'd have to say, David Dempsey, if he doesn't start, Conor Boylan and these guys, they have a load of lads that can come in and turn the game, whereas I don't think Clare have those same kind of reserves now.
Yeah, I mean, if you're to go through star for star, I mean, every line of the field, Limerick have excellent players. I mean, Clare, they're going to probably bring in Eva Quilligan in the goals, whereas at the flip side, you've got Nicky Quaid, who's done it at the top level for a few years, well, many years. He's always been a good goalkeeper. You've Sean Finn, absolutely brilliant in the full back line. That half back line, Declan Hannon, Dermot Burns, and maybe it'll be Barry Nash. He's obviously really, really good. Midfield, Keane Lynch, Will O'Donoghue. We'll assume that that's going to be the midfield pairing. Graham Mulcahy arguably could have been hurler of the year in 2018. That vaunted half forward line that's absolutely huge and could disrupt Clare, even just in terms of winning puckouts. Aaron Gallan up in the forward line. It's just star name after star name. It's very
just
hard.
on that chain, the half forward line, if Clare are going to win and be competitive, and Kilkenny kind of showed them last year, they're going to have to stop Kyle Hayes, Gerard Hegarty, Tom Morrissey, like winning ball and taking them on. Like it's so important. Between the Clare half forward line is going to have to work so hard and give the Clare half back line so much cover there. The two wing forwards are going to have to be up and down like that, in on top of particularly Hegarty and Morrissey. If they can stop them somewhat, they'll have some sort of a chance. But like if that half forward line is dominating early, like Clare are in big trouble, I think.
I wonder, will David Reedy, who's back on the panel this year, and he's obviously a boost because he's a very good player. He's a small, nippy type of player, or maybe Davy Fitzgerald, who we've seen in the half back line at times, and is a brilliant ball carrier, especially if he's getting it off the shoulder of someone and carrying it on, rather than being up in centre forward where he'll collect it and probably have his back to goal a nice bit. I wonder which road they'll go down. Will they have somebody who's looking to step off Declan Hannon like Reedy and sort of be able to pick off points? And then of course there's the issue, will he get swallowed up by Will O'Donoghue and Keane Lynch? It's hard to know which way Brian Lohan will go, but you always get a sense, like a former full-back or whatever, maybe he'd go with the physical approach. But to be fair, in many respects, that's probably that will be playing into Limerick hands if you try to play a physical game.
Yeah, Tony Kelly is another option, obviously, to win centre forward as well, because you're posing big questions to Declan Hannon, who likes to sit back. Maybe that would force Will O'Donoghue or one of the midfielders then to drop and pick him up. There's a lot of questions there. Like David Fitzgerald was experimented with centre forward in the league and he was good, but this is a different story altogether. Again, much like Lohan coming in his first season, David Fitzgerald will be parachuted in centre forward in a big championship match. Having not that much experience there, and I've had that happen to me before, even with the Offaly under-21s. I played centre forward in the under-21 championship, and ended up marking Tomas Brady, and it was grand. You were going well in training and stuff like that, in a couple of challenge games. Then you're not used to playing there in a championship game, and it's really all about winning ball, and you're just bang. And I was walking off with my tail between my legs after about 25 minutes, and something like that could easily happen. He just doesn't have that experience, and you're coming up against a half back line that's going to be so hard to break down. So I don't know. I'd probably be I'm a big believer in going with what you know. Like if he puts Kelly, just say if he puts Kelly in there, or he fleets between midfield and centre forward, there's a chance he could get on a bit of loose ball and put over a couple of points. Like for Clare to be competitive, Tony Kelly's going to have to hit 4 or 5 from play. Realistically, that's just the way it is.
My prediction is that Tony Kelly will be blotted out of this game for the most part by Limerick. I think John Kiley, we're not telling John Kiley anything he doesn't know if we're saying you need to shut down Tony Kelly. Their whole game plan will be based around shut down Tony Kelly, shut down Shane O'Donnell, and try and make sure that they can't just work the ball up through the lines or get it into David Reedy's hands or whatever it might be. Like, you and I probably would have said Limerick will win this probably by 5 or 6 points if Clare had absolutely everybody. And they don't have everybody. Compared with this time last year when they lost by 18 points, some of their stars have been taken away. This is a team that hasn't won Munster since 1998. They've got the hardest route. I would imagine, as much and all as, and you've been in the dressing room whereby nobody expects you to win, you've got injuries, basically their situation, and it leads to a massive performance. I think Limerick or Clare will leave it all out in the field, but I think ultimately it's got to be a 10-point plus defeat here. I mean, if you were to call it yourself, what way are you going?
Yeah, 6 is the handicap, and it could be a tight game for an hour, but Limerick could still pull away and win by the guts of 10. So if it was me, I'd be going with the Limerick -6 probably route. Just can't see it. They're just going to create too many chances, Shane. And unless they're putting up 20 wides or something like that, which is very unlikely. Another question is, you know what you're going to get from Aaron Gillan from frees. Who are Clare going to have on frees? Are they going to have David Reedy or are they going to have Tony Kelly?
But this is the thing, yeah. There's so many, and I mean, back to the goalkeeper as well. Quilligan could end up being a brilliant goalkeeper for Clare, but we already got the certainty of knowing that Nicky Quaid always performs. I mean, I could put the kibosh on him here, but in general, this guy always performs, and throughout the pitch, you've got that certainty with Limerick. The flip side is they did lose 3 championship games last year. They lost to Cork, who seemed to, much in all, as Limerick won that All-Ireland semi-final after extra time in 2018. Cork do seem to have their number in respect that they're always really, really competitive with them when other teams get battered by Limerick. Obviously, Tipperary beat them, but that was a bit of a dead rubber at the end of Munster last year. and they didn't have the full team out. They basically took out their star players, so can't really count that. Then obviously the Kilkenny game, where there was that bogus 65 call at the end of the sideline that was knocked out Darragh O'Donovan's sideline. So really, they lost that game to Cork last year and probably denied a chance at extra time against Kilkenny. So their form holds up really well. They're obviously Munster champions, they're league champions from last year, looking to retain it here. I just can't make a massive case for Clare. I'd like to, first game of the championship, you want to think this is going to be blood and thunder, this is going to be close all the way. But I don't know, I just can't make a big case for Clare.
Well, Shane, you're not the only one. I can't either, and by all accounts from chatting a good few people down in Clare, they're struggling to make a case for them as well. And I think they'd be pleasantly surprised if they came out and delivered a massive performance. But I maybe we're being very harsh. They're 20 to 1 to win Munster, but I think I'd be surprised if they were within 6 or 7. I genuinely would. It's hard. I'd be absolutely amazed if they it would be a massive shock if they won the game. I can't see it.
There's a real grudge match going to go on in the Leinster Championship this year. Laois are meeting Dublin. Obviously Laois knocked out Dublin this time last year, and it was a massive shock because they'd just come up from Joe McDonough. It was Eddie Brennan's first year. Matty Kenny had a good start to life as Dublin manager, having gotten to a league semi-final, beating Tipperary and Thurles along the way. Knocked out Galway, his own native county, sensationally in the final round-robin round in Leinster. And I was at Portlaoise. I was doing co-commentary on Midlands Radio alongside Jack Nolan. And I'm just going to play a little bit towards the end of the game of the commentary from Midlands Radio because it was great stuff from Jack. He was losing it.
Man who levelled the club final in 2018 and took to a replay. Of course, Martin! There's the ball! Let's save the top of the ball! John Martin! Put it over! Lisa hit by O'Donnell! The shock of the year! What a shock! The crowd come onto the field! Oh my God, that's history! You see?
Oh, I can't listen to myself. But Jack was absolutely losing it. It was some atmosphere there in Portlaoise that day. And obviously I would have a lot of club mates playing for Dublin, and I was kind of sick in one way to see them lose. And obviously Matty as well, being my former manager. It was some stuff, and it was actually a special day in Portlaoise.
The goose pimples even listening to it. Yeah, it was unreal. I would love to get Jack's heart rate near the end of that match. I'd say it was going 220, 230 or something like that, I'd say. It was unbelievable. I remember chatting Ross King after, and he said he was asked for everything but his underpants on the field after by all the Laois people that were there. They just invaded the pitch. It was probably the one of the shocks of the season, but one of the feel good stories of the season as well. And Laois went for their few pints after, much like they did. They were only after winning the Joe McDonough the week before. And Eddie was fairly open about that they had to play a week after, and they delivered that sort of a performance a week later. It was unbelievable. Yeah, it was brilliant.
Yeah. I reckon that Matty Kenny has the ultimate stick with which to beat his players coming into this. It's going to be hard to know what Dublin team is going to be out there. They haven't played any challenge matches as far as I know. I think it's probably been all in-house training matches. Whether that's an issue with finding someone to play or with trying to keep things quiet and keeping things tight, I'm not 100% sure. But the form lines, we don't know anything about how this Dublin team is going to perform. They weren't good in the league. They beat Laois and Carlow, but they lost to Kilkenny, Clare and Wexford, and fairly poorly in some of them. So we're kind of coming in very much in a vacuum here in terms of information, and possibly same with Laois as well. They didn't even get to finish their club championship. So from Eddie Brennan's point of view, does he even know what he has?
Yeah, well, it's just from a Dublin point of view, we're literally only going to find out when we see the team sheet probably 15 minutes before the match. Don't know whether Liam Rush is going to play. Don't know whether, presume Conal Keaney will play. But we don't know. We don't know where Chris Crumbly is going to be playing. I'd imagine in the full forward or the half hour line. But there's such a vacuum of information, as you say. It's nearly trying to get information out of Dublin footballers now at this stage. There's just nothing coming out of the camp nearly whatsoever. So it's going to be very, very interesting, as you say. You'd imagine Matty does have a stick to beat them on the 15th of June last year when they beat Galway. Dublin's season, it looked like they could go anywhere, and then all of a sudden their season was over. They were almost, they did have one eye on facing Tipperary in the All-Ireland quarter-final, because Owen O'Donnell was named in that 26 last year and didn't play. If that had been a knockout game as in if it was Tipperary the week after, those guys would have played. There was definitely one eye on the next day, and when you have one eye on the next day, things like that can happen. Laois brought an unbelievable intensity to that day, and just they were in Dublin's faces. Now I will say, when I look back at the game, Dublin hit a cruel amount of wides that day. Like they wasted. It was almost like Laois were going on real well, but Dublin were really adding to the occasion, adding to their own kind of demise almost. With every wide, the crowd in O'Moore Park just raised, the decibel levels went up and everything like that. And it all kind of created a perfect storm for Laois. Now, like that same perfect storm is probably not there this year, realistically. And Laois have a couple of guys that were central to that win last year. Doesn't look like they're going to be playing. So, like Mark Kavanagh, I was just chatting to Eddie Brennan in recent weeks, and he just talked to me through about the injury hell. He said it is another year from hell he's had injury-wise. So he's out with a shoulder injury at the moment. I think it's an AC joint, having already suffered a knee injury, which he went under the knife for in either December or January of last year. He's had he had a finger break, and he had a knuckle break as well. So that's all with the shoulder. So he hasn't had a clear run, maybe like he had last year. Eddie said he's a very outside chance of featuring in the championship. Now he could have been playing coy enough to me, and maybe he'll feature on Saturday evening. But he said it's coming too soon for Dublin because he won't have played any matches. But we're hoping that if we're out in the week or two after that game, he has a chance. Aina Lyons is another guy. He was on the pitch at the end of that game. He's only kind of 75% through his cruciate rehab, and Charles Dwyer, who was brilliant that day, got a couple of points. He hasn't returned to the squad, despite some reports of the contrary. Picky Maher is back in on the squad, and Sean Downey from Balnakill is back in as well. But there's a bit of an unknown there. Like if Mark Kavanagh was fit, if they had a fit Charles Dwyer, if they had a fit Picky Maher, like it's not the perfect situation like it was last year. They were coming into that game like at a perfect pitch last year after winning the Joe McDonagh and having everyone available to them. It's not the same this year.
Oh, they've put people on notice of their quality. But like Mark Kavanagh is also a brilliant free taker, so you're taking that out of the team also. Like at the same time as, and you know, Eddie Brennan, who you've spoken to, he has talked about not everyone committing, and that's the same again this year. As far as Dublin are concerned, they don't have Sean Tracy, who started that game last year in Laois. They don't have Darragh O'Connell also. So neither of those guys are involved. I'm interested to see, does Matty Kenny go down the route of physicality with the likes of Conal Keaney in the team again this year? Or does he decide to go with pace? I would imagine that Eamon Trollier-Dillon, who's an excellent player and probably the fastest player, give or take, in the panel, I'd imagine he'll be in there. You'd imagine Danny Sutcliffe, and we always keep talking about, can he get back to that top level of his game? And we probably haven't seen that all-star level for about 6 or 7 years at this stage. But he's still, like, potentially he can destroy teams. Will Keane Boland be in there? He's probably a name that's not talked about across the country, but he's quite a good player. Mark Schutte, like, can he hit top form? I'm not sure where he's at in terms of the pecking order at the moment. Ronan Hayes, you know how much I like him. I think he's a really, really good player. And then it has somebody from the club championship stood out. Like Nafina were really good up until they got knocked out in the knockout stages, hammered us in the group stages in Dublin. With someone like, I'm not sure, Conor Burke, could he force his way into the reckoning? Donal Burke is back this year. He's a good free taker as well. Really good young player, and probably again not known across the country. So who'll force their way into the team? That's the thing. Chris Crummy was interviewed during the week, and he said, from my perspective, and I can't really speak for other people, I got a sense of hunger and appetite for the games to go ahead in my own squad. He was centre forward for Lucan in the championship this year. Very quiet against us in the county semi-final. Good earlier in the year. We saw him in the league a couple of times, and I thought he was quite good centre forward. Does it work in championship? We'll see. But Dublin definitely need ball winners in the forward line, and his athleticism and mobility is very good as well. Maybe Sean Moran, he was used in the forward line for Coola this year in the championship. Maybe they'll look at moving him in the forward. But it is robbing Peter to pay Paul, because if you had Sean Moran and Chris Crummy in your half back line, along with the likes of Shane Barrett, Owen O'Donnell, Paddy Smith, Keane O'Callaghan, you've arguably one of the best backlines in the country. So you don't necessarily want to rip that up. But the forward line, it is lacking a little something.
It's just like you're taking away a guy that you know you're probably going to get a 7.5 to 8 performance out in defence.
And Crummy generally scores a point or two from wing back anyway. And if you put him up to the forward line, that's what he might get. And like, he got that goal last year against Galway by following a defender or an attacker out the field. So if you put him on whoever you think might roam in the half forward line of the opposition, he might do just as much damage that way anyway.
Yeah, 100%. He's as prolific, and this is the way with some guys. He's as prolific from wing back as he would be from wing forward or centre forward, just because he's used to facing the goals. He's used to facing that direction. When he gets the ball, he's facing forward. I think personally, Matty will go with probably a lot of his bigger players in attack. I think he'll go with a bulky forward line that are going to really, really get stuck in and are going to win a lot of ball and possibly get them on the front foot that way. Don't see him playing a lot of nippy forwards. I'm just not sure if that will suit. I think he'll play a lot of guys who he knows what he's going to get out of them physically and have the capability to get on ball. It was interesting to hear Eddie Brennan as well. I think he was being quite coy. I think he was in one way saying what he expected from Dublin, but in another way questioning them almost as well. He said to me, I expect Dublin to come with absolutely everything. And this is in particular, these words I think are particularly interesting. If there's anything in these guys, I've been in their position in sport, and we all know what it's like to get clipped, and then you have that team the following year. It's easy to motivate lads and get them focused, and I fully expect that we're going to be dealing with a different animal. Again, if there's any bit of character in these Dublin lads, any bit of real heart in them, will get the full brunt of that. And I think there's veiled question marks about their heart, about their character within those comments. I think he's fully aware of what's probably coming down the tracks, but they're definitely braced for it. And the fact that he's building it up to be this thing that's going to come to try and steamroll them. In a way, I think he's kind of trying to put pressure on Dublin. And I don't necessarily think that he thinks that they're going to come with as much kind of ferocity as he's saying, but he's almost trying to add pressure to Dublin by what he's saying. That's my own feelings on it.
I'm there thinking, how is this going to be portrayed and fed to the Dublin squad? Those particular quotes. And having been in a dressing room and with Matty and like some of that backroom team, Shane Carney do the stats, and he's very, very good at distilling stats down and picking out little things to focus on, even from the opposition. But I remember a few years ago in a Leinster club game, we were coming up against some team or other, and someone had done an interview with one of the players from the opposition side, and he said almost nothing, but they were able to find a way to take something out of it to kind of key in the players, what have you. That sort of thing there. If there's anything in these Dublin lads, I can imagine Matty absolutely spitting fire at the thought of that. Like, lads, you're being questioned here. Like, what are we putting in all this effort for? We'll go out and sort of show them. So I think one thing that you will always get from Dublin is they'll absolutely leave every ounce of themselves on that field and leave nothing in the dressing room. Like, that's one thing. You might say there isn't that quality in the forward line. Who's going to score the goals? Who's going to hit like 7 from play? Fine, there aren't those players. But I don't think you ever question what Dublin leave out of the field. Every team has had a bad day. Every team has flopped. And, you know, it's happened a couple of times that they've gotten hammered. But I think in general, if you look at that Leinster Championship over the last few years in particular, they are always thereabouts with 60, 65 minutes on the clock. The odd time they'll fade away because they don't have the scores. But I don't think heart is going to be in question in this particular game.
Just on that, Shane, about how different people try to motivate teams and players in different ways. There was Kilkenny 21s were playing. It could be nearly 15 years ago at this stage, but they were playing Dublin. I think it was an under-21 championship match in Nolan Park, and the manager was in, like, as they would be in the dressing room, maybe, you know, an hour and a bit before the match, and he was putting something up on the wall. And there was one or two players there just kind of looking at and didn't really, you know, you don't really pay any attention to this type of thing or whatever. And then all of a sudden, 5 minutes before they went out on the pitch, you know, he was kind of saying, you know, everybody's saying that Dublin are the coming team and Dublin are going to take Kilkenny off their perch. And then he was like, he looks at the thing on the wall and he's like, what's this? The headline in the paper was like, Dublin set to take over Cats, and this kind of crack. And he just like, it's amazing what people will do to try and get any sort of an edge. Now, like, it's kind of an emotional kind of a trigger that you're trying to get. You can't use it the whole time, but there are definitely times when it works. Like, what motivates me sometimes, if there's a power rankings in Offaly Club Hurling and Borough are down number 6, and I know the journalist who's written it, and I'm like, this is like, you want to show him, you want to prove it's a basic human instinct. So I think those comments from Eddie will definitely light a fire under him as well. Then, as long as that, he also said, like, the challenge is for Laois to be consistently competitive now. So he just said as well, the challenge is to stack up what happened last year. It's gone. So now the challenge is, can we be competitive consistently at this level? Are we ready to take on an angry Dublin team that are coming to do away with us? We have to be ready to meet the challenge head on, and that is the ultimate challenge. Let's see where we are now. Have we grown? Have we developed? Have we moved on? I understand that what Dublin are feeling, and our players have to know that too in terms of their preparation and be able to meet that challenge head on, because if we're 1% off, we're going to get wiped out. We have to be ready to take on Dublin, and if we're going to succeed, we'll have to go a few notches higher than last year. So that's the huge challenge in front of us. I tell you one thing from Eddie, and even talking to him, you'd be motivated by listening to him. Like, he set the gauntlet down for Dublin, but he's also set the gauntlet down for his own guys as well. You know, are we one-trick ponies? Are we one-hit wonders? People are saying that we're not going to be able to produce it again. So it's kind of an interesting one there as well. I think he's motivated both teams in one go, I'd say.
And do you know, I disagree with you on the point of Dublin going for a big team. I think that they'll look for a bit of speed around the field.
You think so, yeah?
Yeah, I think so, because part of that perfect storm last year was having the game in Portlaoise, and that's not a small field, and it's a good little stadium and all that kind of stuff. But we're talking about Croke Park here. We're talking about wide open spaces. Dublin don't necessarily lack big players anyway. The likes of Sean Moore and the likes of Chris Crummy, Owen O'Donnell. You know, a lot of these guys are very, very physical. Liam Rush, if he can play, that remains to be seen. But I'm not sure if he's still injured. I mean, he's had a good run in the sense that St. Pat's Palmerstown, I don't think they could even fulfil their fixtures in, I think they're playing in the Senior B, I'm not 100% sure, in Dublin, but they couldn't even fulfil their fixtures. They only played one club game in Championship, so he's probably barely played at all for the club. He hasn't really played for Dublin, I think, at all this year. He's had all those sort of ankle injuries and different sort of injuries in the past couple of years. We saw how effective he was last year in terms of winning penalties and frees.
There's a fair chance, Shane, that he hasn't played a game in months,
this is the thing,
realistically.
This is the thing. And then, is he good to go now all of a sudden at Croke Park? That's a big ask. I don't know, because as we said, they haven't played challenge matches. The information is kept very tight. It's not like Matty Kenny's answering the phone to me. I'm not even bothering trying to ring him. You know, there is no point. I know there's no point. So it remains to be seen. But I think they'll pick a bit of pace. I think, yeah, I'm interested to see the team. Like yourself, we need to kind of see the team before we can fully weigh it up. But I'd be thinking he'll go more for pace than anything else if he can get. Just try and move Laois around what should be a bigger pitch. And because Dublin have been operating at this level for a few years more, I think I'm just about going to plumb for Dublin here.
There's an interesting one for Laois as well. There's a guy likely going to be playing probably either cornerback or wing back by the name of Fennelly. He's more known as a cross-country runner, actually, than a hurler. I think he was Laois Senior B hurler of the year last year, but he's probably going to be tailor-made for tracking one of those kind of maybe nippier guys if they do play. I think this would be unbelievably interesting if Mark Kavanagh was fit and if Cha was there. I do think that'll take away from them. Now, maybe Mark Kavanagh will play some part, but just the fact that Laois don't have the full complement, I'd be edging for Dublin. But I think it could be tight for a long, long time. Like I would imagine I would say that this would be tighter than the Clare Limerick game and more evenly contested than that game as well. Would I be that surprised if Laois won? I'd be surprised enough just because of what they're missing, but I think they'll give them a good run for their money.
So that's the Liam McCarthy level matches this weekend. There's obviously Joe McDonagh, Christy Ring Cup is on, Laurie Maher, Nicky Rackard. There are so many games going on this weekend. Now we're going to jump down a division extra and go down to the Christy Ring Cup first of all, because your own county, Offaly, they'll be massive favourites against Kildare. I don't think there's any doubt about that, having hockeyed them earlier in the year, 228 to 18 points in the Keogh Cup. But of course, there's been big issues this week in the sense of COVID cases within the camp. 3 players were named to start in the Leinster Under-20 match on Wednesday evening, winning that game 2-20-3-9 against Westmeath. But Durrow's Ross Ravenhill and Brian Dignan and Shinrone's Killian Sampson, they were all pulled out of the starting 15, and they're all part of the senior panel as well, aren't they?
They are, yeah. I think Killian Sampson, I was looking at the game, I think he came on at the very, very end. They were saying he was coming on anyway, and I didn't actually see him on the pitch. But the other 2 guys didn't feature. And from what I'm hearing, around yesterday afternoon, around 5:30, there was a message sent out to all the Offaly players that they were made aware of a positive COVID test within their squad. And this is the part that I find very peculiar, is that all players on the squad, all backroom team members and management were deemed close contacts by the HSE, and they've been told to self-isolate for 14 days, which is kind of in contrary to other cases around the country where, like for example, chatting John Kiley down in Limerick, and he said that if they have a positive test, there will be little or no one will be deemed a close contact because they're all travelling alone. They're all, in different changing rooms that are well ventilated and things like that. So I'm not sure how the guts of 40 people could be deemed close contacts of the positive test. So they're self-isolating for 14 days. The last time this guy was at training was on Tuesday, October 13th. So they're all technically at the moment self-isolating until Tuesday, October the 27th, which obviously would mean that they might have to concede or give a walkover in this game at the weekend, which would be a disaster, really. That would mean that they'd have to go in through the back door and play the following week, and there'd be no trap door if they're beaten. Plus, they'd have to go in the following week having not trained basically for a week. So they're going through the rapid testing program at the moment. Time is fairly of essence, so I assume they're being tested today and we'll have results tomorrow. But given the HSE guidance that they're getting, they're still being told to self-isolate for 14 days. And that's kind of in contrary to what other county squads, for example, Roscommon have a positive test, but they're still going ahead with their league game this weekend. There's
Antrim
only a handful of people.
Antrim have two hurlers. And in their situation...
But in Roscommon, there's only been a handful of people that have been deemed close contacts of that player. So I'm not sure, unless Offaly were doing something that they shouldn't have been doing, how, all that amount of people, without being smart, you'd have to be doing something in a phone box for 40 people to be deemed close contacts to one people. So it's a strange one, and it puts having, after the Offaly Miners win at the weekend and the 20s winning last night, this puts a kind of a different feel on what could have been a really, really good week, a kind of a bright spot of a week, compared to maybe the last 2 years, which have been a bit of disaster all in all with the seniors.
Yeah, and in many ways we wanted to build up this game in a sense of Michael Fennelly, former Kilkenny captain and obviously excellent player for them over the years. He's manager of the Offaly side. David Herity, former Kilkenny goalkeeper, he's the manager of the Kildare team. So you've got a battle of former teammates, Cody's Kittens, or whatever way you want to talk about them in terms of managers who've come from his reign. That's what we wanted to focus on rather than this. I think it's going to be a tough day at the office for, assuming this game goes ahead, and as we're chatting here, the game has not been called off. It's hard not to see Kildare winning this well, because Offaly are operating at a different level to everyone else. They played in Division 2A, obviously won 3 games, drew 1 and lost 1 out of 5, whereas Kildare are operating a division lower. And realistically, Offaly should have been winning the Joe McDonagh last year with the players they have. So they're going to walk the Christy Ring Cup, assuming they can fulfil the fixtures.
Yeah, it's looking very, very ropey at the moment, Shane, being honest with you. Looking very, very ropey. In that message that was sent out to the players, it was actually mentioned by the manager, Michael Verney, that it's not looking good for this weekend. So I don't think it's as cut and dry as that. If all the players are self-isolating and doing as they're told, they won't have any team this weekend. So I'd just like to put my hand up. I'm available for selection. It has been...
Come and get me, please.
Yeah, it's been 8 years since I played for Offaly, and I had an unsuccessful stint with Wicklow in the middle of those 8 years. But I got a text last night from a fella, and he sent me on. Did you hear about what's going on in Offaly? And he just said, "Stay loose," with 2 laughing faces, after. And I won't mind. I was after having 3 bags of sweets after about half an hour before that, and my stomach wasn't feeling too loose. But the case is at the moment there'll be no management, there'll be no backroom, and there'll be no players. I don't know if that's going to change over the next while. I'm hoping that, and I think there's a lot of confusion because this is not the way it seems to have been dealt with in other counties, or this is not the information that other counties are getting with a positive test.
Yeah.
So if other counties were getting this information because of positive tests, there'd be no games. There'd be no games anywhere because Roscommon they'd all be deemed close contacts, and they wouldn't be able to field the team at all. So hopefully there'll be some clarification over the next 40 hours.
Yeah, who knows? We could end up with an Offaly under-20 team with Michael Verney standing centre back. You know what I mean?
Hey, come here.
I'd pay to see that.
No matter how bad they are, I definitely will not be playing centre back.
Well, okay, we'll just talk about it as if Offaly are going to be able to operate and put a team out. They hammered Meath in a challenge match recently. They hammered them, and Meath are operating at a division higher in Joe McDonagh level. So that's that kind of gives you an indication of what we're dealing with here. There are a lot of quality players. Ben Keneally is centre back. He's an excellent player. Probably arguably up there with the best players in the entire championship, this particular championship. Oisin Kelly has been scoring for sport. I believe he put up an awful lot of scores against Kildare earlier on in the year in the Kyo Cup. And realistically, like the underage coming through, collectively, I'd imagine these Offaly players are together for far more months of the year than the weaker counties that would be down at Christy Ring level traditionally. That those teams, they're underage, they're probably getting together for 6 weeks, 2 months max. Whereas Offaly probably, like you'd imagine the strength and conditioning of the younger players coming through from the likes of Offaly, that these lads are ready to hit the ground running a bit quicker than some of the other teams at this level. Would that be fair to say? Much and all is the criticism that Offaly have had in the last number of years, and you did take your eye off the ball and all that. You'd imagine that the ship has been righted somewhat in the last year or two.
Yeah, no, a lot of the guys, particularly the younger guys that will be on that senior panel now, would have a good few years behind them and would have a good level of strength and condition and a decent level of coaching in the last couple of years as well. You're looking at, as I said, Ben Keneally, Oisin Kelly, you're probably throwing Shane Dooley into the mix there as well. Like, Offaly have a couple of big players, Keelan Kiley, guys like that could potentially be game winners, particularly at this level. Whereas Kildare are going to be playing a much kind of younger squad. Obviously won the Christy Ring 2 years ago, was it, under Joe Quaid. Now, I believe Kildare were barely together when Offaly played them in the Kyo Cup earlier. Like, they barely met up at all and were down a load of players. I believe David Slattery, the ex-Kildare footballer, has been called in as well. And he'll be...
well, that's because I told you. That's why you believe it. I told you.
Yeah. So he's one of these guys that you literally can't miss. He's like a Mickey Burke. He's got plenty of tats, so you'll see him straight away, and he's very noticeable. They obviously have got some really good young players as well. Brian Byrne, I know Brian Byrne is good enough to be on the Kildare football panel, but he focuses his attentions on football from Naas. Naas is kind of a little hotbed of hurling now. They would play a lot of their club hurling underage in the Kilkenny Championship as well, and would often pit their wits against the best in Leinster. Is it James Burke, I think it is, wing forward as well, who got 7 or 8 in the Christy Ring Cup final a couple of years ago as well.
I remember he got ill a couple of years ago, and he was actually, the prayers been said for him. Like, I mean, he made a serious recovery. I did an interview with him before. I might post that up again. And from Kildare's point of view here, like, is it a case that, you know, it's down to Offaly? If Offaly use the ball well here, get the ball to Oisin Kelly, get the ball to Shane Dooley and so on, that there's not a whole pile that Kildare can do here? Or are we sort of doing down their chance a little bit too harshly? And also, I believe that Offaly's work rate has gone through the roof, that they're like a bit of a mini Kilkenny these days with Michael Fennelly in charge, and he's probably, you know, pushing his values and what has been so successful for him at club and county level, that he's trying to get them to adopt those sort of values. And also the use of the ball will be a little bit better. And the red cards, which have obviously marred Offaly for a couple of years at this stage, a bit of a running joke, the lack of discipline, that he would have tightened all that up.
Yeah, there are probably a couple of things he's gone after. Like, the work rate has gone through the roof by all accounts. Just hearing like bits and pieces of stories from GPS stats and stuff like that, and even stats for hooks and blocks and that have gone miles up. They played Tipperary actually in a challenge game a couple of weeks ago, which I thought was a strange one. Now they took a fair beating. From Tip's point of view, it doesn't make much sense to me, and from Offaly's point of view, probably doesn't really make much sense as well. But maybe they were just trying to focus the minds a bit more, maybe, and realise that we should be beating everyone in the Christy Ring, but this is the next level, and just to maybe focus the minds of maybe what could be down the line. But he's definitely gone after the work rate. The use of the ball is an awful lot better. Even the cornerbacks, they're trying to work the ball out. There's no clearing the ball up the field. They're trying to play to some sort of a system. And without being disingenuous to Kildare, a lot does centre around Offaly. If Offaly show up and are on point and, you know, are accurate and take their chances, they're going to be really, really hard beaten. There's no point in saying any different. They should be a cut above Kildare. Yeah,
and like as I said, Offaly, they were in Division 2A, and some of the other teams in there were playing below that. But interestingly enough, there was 3 different championship divisions playing in Division 2A with, you know, Christy Ring, Joe McDonough and Nicky Rackard all operating at the one division.
Just on that as well, Sligo, who are in the Christy Ring, were actually playing the lowest level of league hurling. So if you look at Division 1, you have 1A and 1B, that's the first division. 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B. So they're playing in the 5th league tier. and they're playing in the third championship tier, which is mad. And they obviously won the 3B final last weekend against Leitrim in an absolute belter of a game, and have won the Nicky record last year, so they're flying it as well. But that's just a bit mad that they're coming from the 5th league tier and they're in the third championship tier.
Yeah, so Sligo won the 3B final, whereas Derry lost the 2B final, and they're playing each other this weekend. Roscommon are also playing Wicklow. So we'll look at the Joe McDonagh. We're jumping back up a tier again. Kerry against Meath, and there's a story about a second player in the Antrim squad returning a positive COVID test. Now, Brendan Crossan did a story in the Irish News, and he was saying not all the Antrim squad have access to a car, while others don't drive, and as a result, car sharing to Tullamore last week for that league final against Kerry, that was unavoidable. The squad stayed in individual chalets the night before the game and used 2 changing rooms at O'Connor Park, one for the backroom team and the other for the 26-man squad. So the chairman, Kieran McAvanagh, he's after saying since, "We hope the Westmeath match goes ahead. We followed the protocol. We stayed in our bubbles. 2 of the players who travelled in one of the cars have tested positive for COVID. Everyone is getting tested, and it's our belief we'll be able to take to the field on Sunday," which is obviously quite different to the experience you were talking about with Offaly. So what are your thoughts on this, Antrim coming in?
Yeah, Antrim are obviously coming in a massive boost. I was chatting to Darren Gleeson on Monday morning. He was absolutely delighted with the fact that their goal for the season. He says they're in bonus territory. Now, I never believe anyone when they say they're in bonus territory coming into a championship, but their main aim for the season was to get Division 1 hurling for 2021, and they have that. And they're going to be coming up against a load of big guns next year. We'll be able to pit their wits against them. They're also, like, they seem to have, from what he's saying, like, they seem to have really bought in. Like, could you imagine Antrim winning a 2A final in previous years with Neil McManus going off after 4 minutes? I personally couldn't.
No, but they've a serious forward line at this stage. Like, Keelan Malloy was taken off early enough in the second half, but he's proven to be a really good player in the last couple of years. Just great pace, left-hander carrying the ball. Conal Cunning, Conor McCann, James McNaughton, they got something like 116 between them as well. So they've a good spread of scorers, and as Sambo McNaughton said with me about a week ago, just leading into this league final, that it's as good a team as Antrim have had since back in his day when they were doing well in the top division of the league and also getting to All-Ireland semi-finals, finals.
Yeah, I was chatting to Niall O'Mara, the Tip player, a couple of weeks ago. They played Tip in a challenge game, or Tip played Antrim in a challenge game, and he said he couldn't get over. He thought they were really, really well coached, and he was very, very impressed with them. And Darren seems to kind of exude an awful lot of confidence about them. He's delighted with how they've kind of bought into the whole thing. The fact that they have this little boost going into the Joe McDonagh is massive. The Joe McDonagh is a funny one. You can probably throw a blanket over the 5 teams in the Joe McDonagh. They're not getting that incentive of going into a preliminary All-Ireland quarter-final this year, but they are getting the incentive of playing on the day of the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship final in Croke Park, and obviously that incentive of playing in the Leinster Championship next year if they win. And in Kerry's, just that thing with Kerry again could rear its head again. So if Kerry were to win the Joe McDonagh, they're supposed to play a promotion/relegation match with the bottom team in the Munster round robin, but there's no Munster round robin this year, and I haven't heard of what the scenario would be if Kerry were to win it. So, like, there would be a lot of feathers ruffled if Kerry won the Joe McDonagh, which is not like, that's not beyond the realms of possibility when you have the likes of Shane Coleman, one of the best forwards in the country. But it's going to be very, very interesting. You also have Carlow dropping back down to Joe McDonagh. Like, I chatted to Colin Bonner last year after, I think it was their last game. They played Wexford in Wexford Park, and I kind of got the sense from chatting to him that he kind of thought that maybe he brought them as far as he could have. And then I was chatting to him maybe 6 weeks later, and he was mad to go back, and he was mad, full of enthusiasm. He said, I think there's more in these lads, and he's gone back a tier now. So the only progress for him in 2020 is to get back up to the Leinster Championship. Like, nothing else will suffice. And then you throw Westmeath into the mix as well. Westmeath obviously going up to Antrim this year, going up to Antrim this weekend, changed from Saturday to Sunday. They are without Killian Doyle, who's moved over to London. He's based over in London. He's hurling with the Gabriel's club over there. I think he moved over for work. Funnily enough, Kerry are without Jack Goulding as well, who's also playing with the Gabriels in London. He moved over during the middle of COVID, I believe, as well. They've gained Davy Glennon, who's transferred from Galway, but to the best of my knowledge, he's not eligible to play in this year's championship. They've also bolstered their backroom team. Noel Larkin, who was involved in the Galway All-Ireland winning backroom team in 2017, is in. He's joining Alan Kearns, who's already there, Westmeath legend Brendan Murtagh, who's a selector, and Alan Budamangan, who we'd all know as a footballer more so. He's involved in a coaching capacity now as well. So Shane O'Brien has really bolstered his backroom team during COVID, and maybe lads that, like Noel Larkin was involved with Kilruan McDonough's, probably wouldn't have had time in a normal year to get involved with another team, but he does now. There's an awful lot of intrigue between all the different stories there, even with Meath. I know you said Meath were heavily beaten by Offaly. Nick Weir took them over this year, and they obviously won the Christy Ring last year, and they'll be hoping to be very competitive. The fact that there's no relegation in the Joe McDonagh this year as well also means that, like, if teams are 3 points down with 5 minutes to go, they don't have to worry about possibly being beaten by 10 or score different and like that. They can really go for a game. So I'd be amazed if any team, I'd be surprised if any team comes through unbeaten, and I think a lot of teams would beat each other. You'd have to probably be favouring Carlow and Westmeath with Antrim just slightly ahead of Kerry. But as I said, any of them can beat each other on a given day.
Yeah, I mean, Kerry pushed Antrim very close in that final. It was 222.
It was a goal at the very end, Shane, realistically. Yeah, a goal near the very end. Yeah.
Kerry didn't have a single player from county champions Kilmoyley. Now, it remains to be seen if Fintan O'Connor changes that this weekend. Shane Conway top scored at 114. So we've talked about some of the excellent forwards that Antrim have, but also like Kerry have arguably the best of the lot in there. So Kerry Meath, that's one of the games. Antrim Westmeath, that's the other. And also Darren Gleeson, he was pretty unhappy with the lack of league final coverage, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, you watched League Sunday on Sunday evening, as I watched it as well, and I was kind of just waiting for the hurling at the end. You know, you're going to see a couple of goals, or because to be honest with you, they were the games. The Division 2A final was the one I was following closest at the weekend, because it's a big carrot for whoever won it. And basically, I just read out what Darren Gleeson said. So you'd be expecting a bit more for the players. It's a ritual after a league match when you're relaxing that night to stick on League Sunday and have a look over it. And even on a Monday night, you're drawn to the TG4 review show. There was a Division 2A final in hurling, and I got 5 seconds for a result being read out. Same for Division 2B down in Derry, which was a good contest, and Sligo and Leitrim in the 3B final. Just 5 seconds. If you want to promote hurling, we spent 2 hours looking at football, and then we got 5 seconds of results in hurling for a Division 2A final between two hurling mad communities. Can you imagine if the Division 2 football final was on? Roscommon and whoever. Imagine if that final wasn't covered. Imagine the fallout from that. You expect better than that. And it's a totally fair point. Like, how they deemed Division 4 league football to show coverage of that, how they deemed that to be that much more important than a Division 2A final that they'd only read out the result is absolutely beyond me.
Yeah, Nicky Rackard Cup is on this weekend as well. Donegal against Longford, Monaghan, Mayo, Armagh and Leitrim. Looks a bit like a 3-way push to win this one between Donegal, Armagh and Mayo. What do you think? Donegal won the Nicky Rackard a couple of years ago.
Yeah, Donegal were obviously up in the Christy Ring and are coming back down. They won it in 2018. They've already got back up to 2B in the league for next year. They won the 3A league final just before lockdown hit. And like, when you look at like marquee players, at that level, if you had one marquee forward, you'd be doing well. Donegal have a couple, so they've Ger Gilmore up front. They have Declan Coulter, who obviously starred for Armagh in recent years. He always ends up, because Armagh and Donegal are at similar level, he always ends up playing against his former county. He's married to Danny Cullen's sister, Danny, that plays for Setanta, and he's also one of their best players as well. So I think he moved up to Setanta, the Crossroads club that we talked about before. And they have Davin Flynn as well, who was a former Tipperary underage star who Liam Sheedy was looking at many years ago around the fringes of his squad. So they're definitely the favourites. Armagh were just denied in the final last year by Sligo, but you'd imagine Donegal would be favourites. And obviously Mayo played in Division 2A of the league, so they've had good exposure, but I don't think they won a game in 2A this year. But you'd probably be favouring Donegal. And then in the Laurie Mar is an interesting one, because there's only 3 teams in it at the moment, and you see kind of how volatile the times that we're living in are at the moment. So you could easily see something happen with one of the counties, and it could be just nearly a straight final between two of the counties. So Lancashire can't play in it, so there's only 3 counties. They were beaten in finalists the last 2 years, so that's the team you would have been put in front and centre to be winning the Laois Mar. They're gone. You're left with Louth, Fermanagh and Cavan, as I call it, a triple threat match, like the good old 3-way dance in wrestling. There's only 3 of them left. Louth won the competition in 2016. They were relegated from the Racker Cup last year, so they've been playing at a way higher level than the other 2. Cavan didn't have a team up until I think 2 years ago. They only got back into it again. So you'd have to imagine that Louth are heavy favourites to be coming through in the Laois Mar.
Yeah, and a quick word then on Pádraig Mahoney being out for the season. There's reports of his injury. He's the captain that Liam Cahill had picked this year. He'd already lost the other, Philip Mahoney has decided to step away from inter-county duty. We know he's moved on from Noel Connors and Maurice Shanahan. It is a big blow to lose your captain there.
Sure, it's massive, Shane. Like, you know, we're talking about like free takers this time of the year. You know, if Waterford get 13 frees, that he's going to score at least 12 of them within 100 yards. Obviously, Liam Cahill probably put a bit more responsibility on his shoulders by making him captain, and that's a massive blow. Just on like we were looking at Waterford's chances for the season. You're kind of thinking, that Cork game is as good as it was, as good as a 50-50 game, in my opinion, and it was a massive opportunity for Waterford to get their first championship win in 3 years. Losing someone like him is a massive, massive loss, particularly like they don't have a lot of big guys with Morris gone, with the Brick gone. They don't have a lot of big guys maybe that are built more for winter hurling. Mahoney has been able to do it at that time of the year with Ballygunner over the last couple of seasons as well. It's a big loss for them. I believe Conor Prunty is back. He's the vice captain. He's obviously a defender as well. You're just wondering where a lot of the scores are going to come from Waterford. Shane Bennett will probably go on, or Stephen Bennett will probably go on the frees, but yeah, it takes away a lot of their kind of weaponry up front. And it's a sickening blow for Liam Cahill again. Like he hasn't had much luck because Neil Montgomery's under pressure, Conor Gleeson is under pressure as well. He's had very, very little luck since he came in there.
Yeah, we'll talk about that Waterford Cork game next week in far more detail, and I'm certainly not ruling out Waterford winning this game at all. But we'll come to that when we may. Right, that's it for the hurling show. I think we've it all said, have we?
Yeah, isn't it great just to be previewing championship games? We don't know the air of kind of not knowing what you're going to get. Like we don't know what we're going to get from Clare or maybe Limerick or even Dublin or Laois on Saturday evening. So actually, it's great to look forward to again. And as I said, it will get people through the next maybe 2 months, hopefully, all going well if the games go ahead.
Absolutely. And just a reminder that today's show was brought to you by our sponsor, eFrontiers, the recruitment specialist. Check them out at e-frontiers.com. Or if you're thinking of making a career move, why not email your CV to ourgame@e-frontiers.com. Thanks very much, Michael.
That's the job, Shane. Thanks a million.